Morning, people. So I'm here at the Conservative Party conference trying to figure out what is the Conservative Party these days, because they're in the middle of a major identity crisis. Because they've had 5 prime ministers in the last 7 years, all wildly different from each other, and yet supposedly they're all the same party. They're supposed to be the party of sensible economics, but they supported a no-deal Brexit, which all their experts said would completely melt down the economy. They also supported Liz Truss, who crashed the pound to the lowest level for 37 years. And so now, given that according to Priti Patel,
this is our last conference before a general election,
I figured I'd ask them what kind of party they want us to vote for. Starting with Tory MP Brendan Clarke-Smith, who gave me an idea as to what he thinks the core values of his party are, but they don't really match up with what his party has actually been doing. What do you say are the core values of the Conservative Party?
Core values, freedom, liberty, caring about your community, your family, your country. Basically, freedom is the number one word that I prefer to use.
Freedom, okay. Would you say that everything that you saw in the policing bill would count as freedom? For example, establishing noise limits on protests, i.e. limiting our freedom of speech?
Well, I think protests are really important, and as I say, in Manchester, if you look at the history of this city as well, you know, and through the country generally, protest is one of the great things. We had to fight for democracy, we've had to fight for other things, and I've got no problem with that at all. I think it crosses a line when people block ambulances and other things.
I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the noise limits on the protest in the policing bill.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you've got people trying to get sleep, if you've got other things, if it's unpleasant for people, if it's antisocial, I think there are limits there for me.
So it was talking about if it's loud enough to protect anybody nearby at risk of feeling potentially serious annoyance or alarm, which includes potentially if I was shouting here and you were in there and you could say you felt alarmed by it, you could tell the police to come and essentially stop me from doing that. Do you think that's a free society?
Well, I think you've got to trust our police there. I think we've got the best police in the world. They're incredibly tolerant. They use common sense a lot.
So you're putting the decision as to whether or not our democratic expression is justified in the hands of the police and out of the hands of the politicians we elect?
Well, it's in our hands in the sense that we give that guidance for the police, but then we have to let the police get on with their job, and I don't think politicians should be micromanaging the police with what they do. They don't always get it right, but I think most of the time their judgment's pretty good.
I just think the idea of if you give them the guidance of if it causes potential serious alarm, you should essentially arrest that person, and that's their judgment as to whether or not which cases they're going to do it and whether or not. Given that the Metropolitan Police was recently found to be, by an independent report, to be institutionally misogynistic, homophobic and racist, are they the sorts of people that should be deciding our democratic freedoms?
Well, and this is why we have investigations into it, why they're making sure that they're getting out sort of the rotten apple, so to speak. And yeah, there are people who don't do the job properly and commit some pretty heinous crimes, and we want to get rid of those. But there's also the vast majority of police officers, I think, are pretty fair. Again, you've got to trust the police.
Okay, but you've established the principle that there are, you call them rotten apples.
Yeah, absolutely.
The report says institutional, systemic.
Yeah.
But you've established that the people that you've given this level of discretion to decide our democratic freedoms have a problem. So again, it comes back to, are we really a free country if that's who you've given utter discretion?
Yeah, I mean, human beings aren't perfect, members of parliament aren't perfect.
But if you say they're not perfect, wouldn't that mean you'd be more careful as to what powers you then give them to impinge on our civil liberties?
Absolutely, yeah. So we give it a lot of thought. These things, they go through the House of Lords.
Now, while the flaws and raging authoritarianism in his policies are clear from that, at least he spoke to me, because that was not the theme of the day. Morning, sir.
No, I'm not talking.
I was wondering if I could get what are the core values of the Conservative Party? Sir? What are the core values of the Conservative Party? Patel, pleasure to meet you. What would you say are the core values of the Conservative Party?
Where are you from?
My name's Kemi. I'm a journalist online.
That's very nice. I'm not doing any interviews.
What would you say are the core values of the Conservative Party?
Don't mind. I'm not doing any interviews.
Thank you. Core values? Conservative Party.
Could you excuse me, please?
I feel like we should just have a conversation.
Perhaps if you'd introduce yourself to me.
My name's Femi Olawale. I'm an online campaigner.
I don't wish to speak to you.
Miss Coffey, I'm a journalist online. I was wondering if I could ask you what the core values of the Conservative Party are? Miss Coffey? Miss Coffey? What would you say are the core values of the Conservative Party?
I'm not doing interviews right now, thank you. So I'm literally just going in here.
Just the core values?
You speak to the...
How do you plan to improve the cost of living? How are those values reflected there?
We'll put you in touch with press office, mate.
I'm sure you will. Miss Badenoch. Pleasure to meet you. Hi. A couple of months ago, you said that the Brexit has been traumatic for the car industry. Is that what people voted for in places like Sunderland? Do you think you're making jokes about POO when I'm trying to ask about hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of jobs? Ms. Badenoch, you said that Brexit has been traumatic for the car industry. Is that what people voted for? A Brexit that would damage their industries? Have any of the trade deals that you've negotiated made up for the loss of Brexit? Have any of the trade deals that you've negotiated made up for the loss of Brexit? You're making jokes about POO. I'm talking about the people of the UK. And given the widespread corruption in the Tory party, I figured I'd talk to one of the fraudsters, namely Robert Jenrick, who sat next to a Conservative Party donor, Richard Desmond, a billionaire, at a Conservative Party dinner. Then the billionaire then asked him to rush along a housing project for him, specifically so that the billionaire wouldn't have to pay £45 million to the council. The billionaire even texted Robert Jenrick saying, "We don't want to let the Marxists have lots of dough." Robert Jenrick did comply with this request, moved it along, and then 2 weeks later, that donor paid the Conservative Party £12,000. We are talking about full-on corruption here. And Robert Jenrick even admitted that his actions were unlawful. And yet, when I confronted him on it... Morning, sir. Do you think we need more accountability in terms of how money is spent in government?
Femi, I don't want to talk to you if that's okay. But thanks very much.
I mean, a few years ago, you unlawfully tried to help a Tory donor get away with...
That's not true. As you know, Femi, that's not true.
£45 million.
You said a number of things about me which are wrong
£45 million
and defamatory, so I think it's probably better if you
£45 million.
None of that's correct, Femi. I don't want to have any more dealings with you, to be perfectly honest.
You admitted that your actions were unlawful, did you not? You admitted your actions were unlawful? Is that correct?
Femi, I've said all I need to say to you. Thanks.
Did you?
If you could leave me alone, thanks.
I mean, we're talking about public money. Defrauding the country of £45 million feels like a pretty serious thing to do.
I think we're all fed up with your lies. So if you could
Really? The problem is that these people know what they've done. They know they've made the country poor. So they have no interest in talking to people who also know what they've done and, most importantly, are willing to hold them to account for it. Now, I loved running into former Brexit Party member of the European Parliament, Lucy Harris, because she once said this when I was on the radio with her.
I think, honestly, short term, there will be an effect on the economy. Short term, yes.
How long short term?
I don't know, next 30 years. Price for democracy and price for sovereignty is high. A lot of people have died for this. It's not as and that is so much more important than a few extra pounds here and there. I'm willing to lose it.
It's been a couple of years since Brexit. You said that a 30-year downturn would be just acceptable. A couple of pounds is what you called it. Do you still feel good about that?
I feel like I missed you. Very nice to chat to you.
You said a 30-year downturn would be an acceptable price for Brexit.
Time in another place.
You said a 30-year downturn would be an acceptable price for Brexit. How do you feel about that now? Is it worth it now? So I'm here at the front of the Tory party conference, and something that I find kind of funny is, you see right there, I'm pointing to it right about there. The slogan they've gone for is long-term decisions for a brighter future. Meanwhile, we had Michael Gove on TV this morning saying this.
Economic forecasting was invented to make astrology look respectable.
So when it comes to making decisions for the future, what exactly are they guided by? Like, their whole shtick around Brexit is that yes, it's doing damage to our economy now, yes, it's damaging the NHS now, but trust me, in future, it'll be good. But if they're telling us that it's basically pointless to try and predict how policies will affect the economy in the future, then they're just flying blind. So selling themselves on the basis of their ability to make the right decisions for the future? It's just fucking weird. But I do want to leave you with some hope, because not everybody I met was garbage. For example, independent Yorkshire councillor Tyler Wilson-Kerr.
Councillor Tyler Callum Wilson-Kerr, Aberdeen District Parish Council.
Cool. And so how do you feel levelling up has worked? Has it helped your part of the world?
I don't think levelling up has worked as the government has sold it. It's not helped my part of the world in Yorkshire, across the Pennines. I speak to my own constituents as a parish council, which is a little village. People can't afford to eat, can't afford to heat. They're worried about the future, not just for themselves in terms of pensions with interest rates, they're worried about the kids and how it's going. I mean, the one thing you can say the government's done okay on is like the devolution deals. So West Yorkshire's got one, we've got Mayor Tracy Brabin, Manchester's got one, and they've just released the B network, the first time in 40 years that British bus services have been franchised. So there's a lot of things like that, but overall it's not worked. Look at HS2, it's been cancelled between Birmingham and Yorkshire. And it's looking like the people in there are going to say no to Manchester-Birmingham. I mean, if they're serious about levelling up, if they're serious about improving the outcomes for everyone in the United Kingdom, in Britain, not just London, the city of London, it's like suburbs. You need to invest in regional transport. It brings people together. You've got Leeds is the third largest financial sector in the UK. We've got no mass transport system. As I said, Leeds is the largest city without a mass transport system. So levelling up, I don't think has worked. I think the idea of it, I mean, we obviously need to level up in the terms of get economic regeneration in parts of the country that are being forgotten. But I don't think the government's working on it properly, and I don't think Labour's got much of an answer either, so I don't know.
What would you want to see?
I would like to see strong devolution throughout the United Kingdom. I mean, you look at other Western countries who are successful in the G7, be it Germany, Norway, Sweden, they've got a form of regional governments. So areas like where we are now, like Lancashire, for example, would have a regional parliament. So they have control of like education, NHS. I know Andy Burnham's pushing for this stuff, but it's not working. I'd like to see more regional control within Britain. So
they'd have the control over the budget, so they'd be able to spend on the infrastructure that you actually need.
Basically, because I mean, there's been no real infrastructure development in the north for decades. So I think if you had like devolved powers brought to the people in the local areas, I mean, it'd stop the problems that caused Brexit. Like Brexit was about regional inequality, like seeing a lot of poverty, deindustrialisation for a lot of times, and I think that's what like a lot of Remain people sort of forgot about. Like they didn't realise that it was about the structural problems that have existed for decades. Like for me, and I was 17 to vote on it. The EU referendum was about, are you happy with the status quo, yes or no? It wasn't about do you want to leave the European Union or not. And
after 6 years of austerity and decades 13, of regional inequality, nobody was happy with status quo.
And no one is still. I mean, Rishi Sunak's got a regeneration idea like now at this conference, but fundamentally nothing's going to happen unless there's real political change in how the structures of power work in the United Kingdom, because people are getting poorer, and I don't think that's current economics model's really properly working.
And finally, I met the mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, and right now he's pushing for all the things that this country desperately needs.
I would call it rewiring the country, because the current system doesn't work. It makes some places and some people more equal than others. We need when every vote is equal, then every person will be equal, and every place will be equal.
Exactly.
That's the way I see it. And I've kind of come round to this, but I'm actually clear now of the view that we need fundamental political reform in this country.
Excellent. And what do you think we need to do to actually make that happen when Labour takes power?
I think it's about making the argument for a different country, a country that works very differently, where power is distributed differently.
And that means regional devolution as well?
It does. It means that. It means a Senate of the nations and regions to replace the unelected Lords, but it also means proportional representation for the Commons. I would also go further and say it means reform of the whip system in the Commons, because the way the system works, from my experience, is it hands too much power to the unelected state. It hands power to the Whitehall bureaucracy. When you have a three-line whip in the Commons where MPs really are kind of rubber stamping some of the views of Whitehall departments. So I think we need to have an honest conversation about how we redistribute power in this country, rewire the country. It's clear that the system we've had has created the north-south divide.
100%.
It's not an accident. It's a product of the system that we've had. So if you want to close it, you have to
give people the power,
rewire the country. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
So to sum up, the Tories can't even answer the most basic questions as to who they are and what they've done. They'll break the law, admit to breaking the law, but accuse you of defamation if you mention it. They claim to be the party of freedom, but they've given absolute power over our democratic expression to a police force that they know is institutionally racist, homophobic and sexist. But we should have hope, because the way out of it is to get an equal voting system and regional equality. I'm Kemi, this has been F Politics, just trying to make sure that politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.